long time. And now that it's actually happening, it just feels great to get it over with, one way or another. Now, what happened next will not be shown in court records because transcripts don't show emotions, but I wrote it down because I was there in the courtroom at the time. Caroline starts bawling at this point. She starts expressing remorse, admitting to lying, crying over her guilt and dread. And look, I'm not gonna read you her whole statement there, but I was watching the jury, and I know for a fact they were moved by this. You know, they might not have understood all the numbers. They might not have understood the embezzlement, but they understand when a CEO starts crying about how guilty they were about what they were doing, what they knew they were doing the whole time. And I think that was a really powerful moment. And that's basically the end of the day. The next day, Caroline Ellison is up for cross-examination. This is really the defense's chance to kind of land some shots. And of course, it doesn't happen. They try to focus in on the fact that Caroline is just trying to get a cooperation agreement, like with the government. The implication being that the only reason she admitted that, you know, she defrauded people, the only reason she's crying is because she wants to get a deal. But the problem with this was that then in redirect, this gets used against the defense when the prosecution uses that to release a tape showing Ellison admitting all of this prior in an all-hands meeting.
Starting last year, Alameda was kind of borrowing a bunch of money via open term loans and use that to make various illiquid investments. So like a bunch of FTX and FTX US equity, a bunch of like other ventures, investments, etc. Most of Alameda's loans got called, and in order to like meet those loan recalls, we ended up like borrowing a bunch of funds on FTX, which led to FTX having a shortfall in user funds.
Just in general, this looked bad. And I just want to say, I'm not trying to make the defense look bad. I understand that I have a bias. But if you're thinking to yourself, wow, this video paints the defense as being bad, that's true, but it's not because I'm trying to select things to make them look bad. It just was like that. And there's no other way to really say that. And that's basically the end of the day. All right, up next, the prosecution has Zach Prince on the stand, CEO of BlockFi. Basically, the point of this was to share the fact that, you know, FTX or Alameda were sending these fake balance sheets around. BlockFi would ultimately go bankrupt because they gave a bunch of loans to Alameda. But I think what's worth highlighting here is how convoluted some of these loans were, because it's worth understanding. The only problem is I barely understand it. So in order to explain it, I just actually had someone else do it. Carly Riley has been covering the trial as well through her channel, Overpriced JPEGs, and she's here to explain sort of how convoluted things were.
Let me see if I can get this in one shot. Okay. FTX US gives a $400 million line of credit to BlockFi, who then starts lending $800 million to Alameda, who in exchange for that $800 million posts collateral back to BlockFi, who hold it in an account that they have on FTX, who lends basically all customer deposits, including BlockFi's collateral deposits, to Alameda, who then uses that money they borrowed from FTX to partially pay back lenders, including BlockFi, who they paid back $150 million to in November of 2022 as everything was imploding, but they never finished paying them back because they went bankrupt.
All right, big thanks to Carly for that. To be honest, even still afterwards, I don't fully understand exactly how the BlockFi thing worked, but usually when things are unnecessarily complicated, it's because someone's trying to hide a ball somewhere. So just understand that the reason a lot of these loans were structured in such a convoluted way was ultimately so that Alameda or FTX could benefit. And that's ultimately what happened. They ended up basically siphoning money out of BlockFi. All right, today we have another big witness, Nishad Singh. He's basically the head of engineering at FTX, but the reason he's important is because he describes finding out that Alameda had basically taken customer money and confronting Sam about it on this balcony, pictured here. Nishad says that he was pacing behind these baskets on the left, and Sam was reclined on one of the white-like chase chairs behind that. In fact, it's not too far from where we are now. Basically, Nishad confronts Sam saying, hey, Caroline's really freaked out about the net asset value situation, and so am I. According to Nishad, Sam then replied, I'm not sure what there is to worry about. Net asset value is fantastic by almost any measure. Nishad replied, well, what about what Caroline said today and Gary said today, that there's 13 billion borrowed and we can't pay it all? Sam said, right, that. We are a little short on deliverables. He then says, this has been taxing me some 5 to 10% of my productivity for this year. Now, this is important because Sam and his defense's excuse traditionally has been, hey, I just found out about this debt, this giant debt that Alameda had in late 2022.
I mean, look, I wasn't running Alameda. I didn't know exactly what was going on. I didn't know the size of their position. A lot of these are things I've learned over the last month that I learned as I was sort of frantically digging into this on November 6th, November 7th, November 8th.
But that excuse now falls flat because clearly we have him saying that he knew about this for over a year. After all, he claims it occupied 10% of his productivity. So that blows a large hole in the defense's case that Sam was some innocent bystander. Now today had a bunch of other fun bits in it too, like spreadsheets of political donations, spreadsheets of venture capital investments, spreadsheets of celebrity endorsements. Yes, I like the spreadsheets. There's fun data in there, like the fact that celebrity endorsements cost $1.13 billion. In general, just the feeling was that, hey, Alameda's burning cash, even as their company is drowning in debt and nobody seems to care. All right, now we're on to the cross-examination of Nishad. And for the first time, this is where the defense starts to get their feet a little bit and things flip pretty quick. The consensus the day before was that all of that was terrible for Sam. Nishad was a star witness. He was there confronting Sam on the balcony. He has this detailed story about, how he did it. But when pressed for details, this is where things got really weak. The defense brought up his lack of certainty earlier in his conversations. Quote, you told the prosecutors that you had a surprising amount of haziness when trying to recall events in June and July of 2022. Nishad responds, I don't remember saying those exact words. There was a lot I didn't remember the details around from that time. Wait, which is it? His testimony is based around him remembering exactly what he said to Sam Bankman-Fried. Now he's saying he's hazy on the details? But it gets worse. Nishad said that when he found out Alameda had stolen money, he felt really betrayed and described it as evil. But then the defense pointed out that Nishad himself had borrowed money, $3.7 million, to buy a house for himself. And where did he get that money? Well, he also took it from FTX, it turns out, which just destroys his credibility, because how can you think something's evil and then use it to get a big house for $3.7 million? So Nishad may have been the best storyteller for the prosecution, but he was also the easiest to pick apart for the defense. All right, day 11, we get Peter Easton, an accounting professor at Notre Dame. His job is to trace what happened to the money at FTX. He begins by showing a chart of the money Alameda owed FTX. 11.3 billion was the peak of their debts. So in theory, Alameda should have had that money they owed as a balance in the bank. But instead, the green line shows Alameda's actual balance in fiat. They owed billions of dollars that they didn't have. Next, Peter Easton showed how this happened through commingling of funds. These are the different bank accounts that Alameda, FTX, their different entities owned. Theoretically, these all should be separate, which is why they're in their own boxes. But in reality, the transactions looked like this. They were all sending money to each other. This is why Alameda didn't have the money. They spent it through these different shell companies. Peter Easton broke down exactly how in 4 categories: investments in businesses, political contributions, charities, and purchase of properties. Then he showed exactly what this looked like with charts like this, showing from left to right how customers' funds were sent to Alameda Research and then spent on some investment Sam himself wanted. They even had chat logs of Sam directing these investments. Peter showed multiple examples like this, Alameda stealing customers' money. We saw it over and over and over and over. The effect of all this was the feeling that almost all of SBF's donations, venture capital, charity, politic contributions, it was all paid for by his customers, which led us finally to this, a pie chart showing what Alameda owed customers along with a breakout of what they actually spent it on. And lo and behold, only a small fraction, 2.3 billion, was held aside for actual customers. Everything else was spent on things like this. And seeing this chart was